What's up? What's happening on a Thursday? It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. I am Craig Hoffman. Anthony Haney is back in D.C. I say back in D.C. because I'm doing the show from our Odyssey sister station in Richmond today, 910 The Fan. Appreciate the folks down here setting me up. Got some stuff going on down here in Central Virginia, and, so here I am. Down here in a studio, and luckily, Anthony, we're a very large company, and we have studios all these places. I keep trying to get away, like, I gotta go somewhere. It's like, we have studios there. I guess I'll just do the show. So here I am doing the show. We are streaming live on YouTube today as well, youtube.com/@theteam980. So you can still watch the show as usual if that is something you are into. Of course, we start today with the massive news that broke just over 20 minutes or so after we got off the air yesterday. I actually got a tweet, Anthony, because remember when Tommy Shepard got fired? And we were off the air for we weren't even off the air. Like, that was the thing. We weren't actually off the air. We had gone to break at 7:56, and the news had come out like 2 minutes beforehand, and we actually missed it. Well, yesterday at least we were off the air, but not by much. And Taj, a frequent listener and tweeter of the show, tweeted me, and I actually had gotten off the Metro and was refreshing my replies, and he's like, "Hey, bro, time to get back on the radio." I was like, what? And that was when I saw the Woj tweet that the Wizards have hired Michael Winger, at which point I started texting people and sending emails and all the bit and going, who the hell is Michael Winger? Turns out he's a very, very smart man. Michael Winger has spent the last couple of years as the number 2 in L.A., and I actually really like him specifically for this role because he understands this role. He understands what it means to be a number 2 and ultimately then what it means to be a number 1. The number 1 here is going to be different. His job is not just to work with the Wizards. Obviously, that's the thing that's ultimately going to determine whether or not he's successful. He could win the next 3 championships with the Mystics and 2 with the Go-Go, and if the Wizards are still in the same spot they are, Michael Winger is going to get fired. That is the nature of these things. But he is someone who has worked under, as a GM, a position he's going to hire for under Lawrence Frank in LA. And Lawrence Frank was that president of basketball operations title who ran things in LA as the lead executive, was certainly the one most responsible for the moves, but obviously did so in kind of I would say, not a non-traditional, because, even if a team only has a GM, they don't have this president of basketball operations title type thing. They would still have an assistant GM, right? So it's not like there's no precedent for having a collaboration, but he's worked in a similar situation where you have this collaborative nature, and that I think is ultimately a good thing. Also, by the way, Lawrence Frank says in a statement that was released just a little bit before the show from the Clippers, of course, the Wizards have officially announced this, so that was kind of what I guess the Clippers were waiting for. But, quote, "This is a tremendous opportunity for Michael, who could not be more deserving. From the day Michael walked into our facility in 2017, he touched every corner of the organization, helping lay the groundwork for our present and future. Michael is one of the NBA's brightest team builders, a strategic and creative thinker who is always a step ahead. We benefited greatly from his expertise and leadership, and we're thrilled that the Wizards recognize his extraordinary talent, and we wish him the best in Washington." Lawrence Frank, president of basketball operations of the Clippers. Someone who's clearly highly respected, and we'll get a lot more insight on him as the day goes. Noah Eagle, who is the play-by-play announcer for the Clippers the last couple of years, he is going to join us coming up at 4:30. But in talking to some folks around the league and everything and getting kind of an insight, this guy is seen as incredibly smart with the salary cap, which is critically important at this juncture of Wizards history. This is a team that is in a very, very tight cap situation still. Tommy Shepard will forever get the credit for helping them get out from underneath the John Wall contract. And, I know a lot of people don't like Tommy and don't want to give him credit for anything, but you got to realize how bad the roster was when he got here, and how it wasn't even that they built such a terrible roster. It's like they built something around John and Brad, and then John got hurt again, and all of a sudden was never going to play for this organization again. And they had signed him to the most significant contract in the NBA at the time. Like, that's a bad situation. And so Tommy helped undo that. Of course, he gets them right back in that situation by signing on to all the things that they did with Bradley Beal, as opposed to protesting or even resigning over giving Brad something that was very silly. And it became even sillier when they did the thing that, frankly, a lot of organizations would do and give him the contract, but it became something that was wholly unique in its lack of strategic thinking. I'm trying to say this as nicely as possible, by giving him the no-trade clause. And once that happened, like, there was no way forward, or very limited ways forward. And so having someone who knows how to manipulate the cap, understands exactly where the rules are and where there are opportunities to take advantage is extremely important. He's also someone who gets the human side of it. There's a bite we're going to play for you. Anthony, do we have it ready now? The one with Rachel Nichols from the panel a couple of years ago. If not, I was planning on playing it in the next segment, but I actually think it might fit here now. But Winger was talking at a Clipper season ticket holder event a couple of years ago, and was basically asked about some deals that they had made. He had traded Tobias Harris and Boban Marjanovic, two of the most beloved players in LA with the Clippers, to Philadelphia. And they were like, wow, are we really going to do this? Like, and they had to have really tough conversations, but make those types of decisions. And I see, in hearing him talk in this clip and seeing how he views basketball as both something that is strategic but something that is human, why someone like Ted Leonsis would be attracted to him as a candidate to run his basketball operation. That's the conversation he's going to have about and ultimately with Bradley Beal is, hey, man, like, we love you. Like, this organization, everything you've done for the team, everything you've done for the city. But at the end of the day, if we want to win, we can't do that with you in this current situation. We don't have the talent. And that's not your fault. That's our fault. And it's the people that were here before's fault, if he wants to say that. I don't get the sense that he probably would. But, like, it's not anybody that's currently here's fault, if you want to try to be diplomatic about it. But at the end of the day, like, that's where we are. We have to move forward. And so where is it that you want to go? Give us a list of teams, or we will shop you and we'll come back with what our preferences are, and you can say yes or no based off the location. Like, that's what he's going to have to do. And that's not, it's easy for fans to think about that conversation because many of you have been dreaming of getting rid of Bradley Beal for years. But for the person who's actually got to sit down across from him and be like, hey, man, I know you signed a 5-year contract, but we really would like to move you and your family away from here. That's not an easy conversation. And the humanity that clearly he brings to the job, I think, is important. So I like the hire from someone who has worked in a similar structure. I like the hire from someone who brings that approach. And I like the hire from someone who has a very specific creative and strategic thinking background and bona fides and skill around the salary cap. That's kind of the extent that I know Michael Winger right now. There's not a lot about him out there in terms of public consumption. There's some articles, but like if you go try to search and find him speaking at different things, it's hard to find, in part because the one thing he hasn't done yet is be a lead executive. He's been an NBA general manager for years now. But when you're a general manager under a team president, the team president's the one that does most of the talking. And so that is the other thing that I think is fascinating about this, and we'll get more insight on this from David Aldridge coming up. We'll get more insight on this in terms of organizational structure from Ava Wallace at 5 o'clock. Ava was the first person I saw reporting on this. Is one thing that's important to note is Michael Winger is not just running the Wizards. Michael Winger is going to run the Go-Go, which is also which is also adjacent to the Wizards. That, to me, that's one job. I like that as one job because it allows you to have cohesiveness between your developmental, franchise, not really a franchise, developmental team, your developmental outfit in the G League team, the Go-Go, and your style of play and how players move back and forth. Someone who oversees both of them and is responsible for both of them is good. What I honestly don't get as much and don't really care about as much for Michael Winger is the Mystics. Not because I don't care about the Mystics, I do tremendously, but because they have nothing to do with the Wizards, and except for a share of some marketing materials and resources, which is good, and they share an owner, which is, good or bad depending on the day. So there's no actual basketball crossover. I guess facilities, things like that. But it's something I would ask Winger or Ted when we get a chance to talk to them. I was told there'll be a press conference in early June, and we, of course, are going to hope to talk to Winger in an extended interview here on the show. But I would be curious, why include all three teams as the president of Monumental Basketball, which is what this title is, versus, say, what is going on in L.A., where Lawrence Frank was the head of the Clippers, and that was the extent of the job. Now, the last part of this that I thought was interesting, and I don't know whether this is an accident or on purpose, but in the press release from the Wizards, bolded at the bottom of Winger's resume was he played a key role in helping build the practice facility that the Clippers are opening next year. Now, the Wizards have relatively recently, opened their practice facility out in Anacostia, but it was really interesting reading the kind of executive confidential, if you will, piece that David Aldridge and Josh Robbins did a couple weeks ago in The Athletic. They talked to a bunch of administrators and executives around the league about the Wizards' job. And one of the refrains was, I would like to see them get an upgrade in their facilities. I do wonder if that's going to be a big part of Michael Winger's job. We've obviously talked about the facility stuff a ton with the Commanders, but do we now see an upgrade or even potentially new facilities, whether it's within some of the existing space? There's a ton of land out there. Do they build on? Do they bring the team back more to Capital One Arena where they used to do a lot of their stuff? So that is something that is certainly on the very long list of questions that we have for Michael Winger, for Ted Leonsis, when ultimately they take their turn answering them. But next, let's get to more immediate things with this. Now that we know who the lead executive is, what are the biggest questions facing the Washington Wizards this offseason? Then we'll be joined by David Aldridge, the Hall of Famer, at 4:30. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. I want to let you hear from Michael Winger. This is about the only time you'll get to do this over the next couple of weeks until he ultimately takes over the job. But Winger spoke on a panel with Lawrence Frank, his now former boss, the executive vice president, the executive in charge of the Clippers, the president of basketball operations, on a season ticket holder panel in 2019. Rachel Nichols was the moderator. I don't think you'll hear either Frank or Nichols, but I tweeted out this clip yesterday, and I just thought it was really interesting hearing him talk about how he thinks about making trades and making moves, balancing the need to win and the very human toll of saying, hey, man, you and your family are going to have to move across the country. Sorry. So here's new Wizards and monumental basketball president Michael Winger back in 2019.
The effort is a lot of the prep, a lot of the planning is to help you be as objective as you can be when it's time to make a decision, so that you're making these decisions based on not necessarily data. I mean, data is a part of the process, but the objectivity of today, the objectivity of the future, against the backdrop of sustainably contending. But emotionally, it's in many cases, it's really hard. It's gut-wrenching. When we were going back and forth with Philadelphia, and you could sort of feel that there was maybe the foundation of a deal in place. I mean, it was really hard because we have a group of people that, we love those guys. And when we're having, conversations in a small group and we're talking about, are we really going to trade Tobias? Are we really going to trade Boban? Are we really going to trade Mike? It's like, that's when you have to really close your eyes a little bit and think to the future and figure out how you're going to build that team that is going to win. And you have to make it really hard in this. They are very emotional, viscerally painful decisions. So it was hard.
Yeah.
There's a phrase he uses in there that is like my dream for this franchise. Sustainably contending. This is the whole, when I went bonkers on the show a couple weeks ago about how I'm kind of fed up with the criticism of the process. This is exactly what I'm talking about. The Philadelphia 76ers, the Los Angeles Clippers, the Golden State Warriors, these teams that have somehow figured out how to sustainably contend. And the Clippers and the Sixers are two great parallels because neither of them have won a title. I don't even think the Clippers have made a conference finals either with Kawhi and PG. I don't think they have. They made it in the second round, as is Philly. They might have made one, but they definitely haven't made the NBA finals. But every single year, they have a legitimate shot to do so. Injuries, bad luck, tough matchups. Like they've seen it all, and ultimately have fizzled out. Whether they've gotten really, really close, the Kawhi shot when Kawhi was in Toronto in 2019 for Philly, probably the closest of either team. But ultimately, like they don't break through, but they've got a chance, and they've got a chance again next year. They'll probably bring Kawhi and PG back in LA. They'll try to, obviously without the services of Michael Winger now, bring in some other pieces to surround. They did a good job. The Russ thing I didn't think was a good idea at the time. That was an excellent signing from them mid-season to even bring Russell Westbrook in. But they understand what they want to do, what they need to do. They took the necessary swings on the right players, and now they, year in and year out, have a chance to win a championship. You can't ask for more than that. You cannot guarantee yourself something better than the chance to legitimately compete. And the Wizards, what they've done is lock themselves in to not having that the last couple of years with how they've managed this roster. And so to hear someone who is willing to make tough decisions and seems to truly understand what it means to build a team that sustainably competes, that is the dream. So hopefully he is given the freedom by Ted Leonsis to execute on that vision, starting with whoever he hires as GM, and then ultimately with the roster, whatever those two people and the staff that they either bring in or keep does together. As for what they actually do now, I think this is an interesting conversation because you're now looking at a fairly hefty, fairly significant to-do list in a very short amount of time. The number one thing that's got to happen is assuming that, let's assume for the sake of this to-do list, that they have permission to trade Bradley Beal. So you have to have a conversation, and like from Leonsis, they have that. First thing you got to do is have a conversation with Brad and just say, look, man, I know that you've had a great run here. I know that you mean a lot to the city. I know the city means a lot to you. Ted already told me that we're going to retire your number. When you retire, you don't got to worry about your legacy. You don't got to worry about anything. But we can't feasibly build the team we want to build with you here, so we're going to trade you. I assume that's the thing. The only other alternative I could see is them trying to build up his trade value over the course of the first part of the season. I could see a world where they think his trade value is higher if they can get him back to scoring 30 a night, and that they build their first half of their season around Bradley Beal scorer and get him back off the ball and try to get him shooting 8 threes a game. And if he has really, really good individual statistics, maybe they can get a little bit more. Maybe that contract feels a little less painful for a team. But I got to think that the conversation with Beal starts with, are you willing to waive your no-trade clause? And I really hope the answer is yes, which leads to number 2, they need to trade Bradley Beal. You just need to start over, and you can't start over with the guys that are here. I would explore trade options with Kristaps Porzingis. I think you want to try to explore sign-in trades with Kuzma. Hey, man, any chance you can do us a favor on the way out? If you find a team that needs to ship back some pieces and shed some salary, like we can work with that. Let us know. And I would not bring back probably any of them. That's going to really bite at the box office next year, but it is what it is. I could also see an argument for keeping Porzingis around, especially because he's such a pro's pro. He really had a great impact on some of the young players last year. And if you look at him and you go, look, man, come back, we'll trade you at the deadline, but we're gonna feature you at the beginning of the year, and we like having you here. I could see having a conversation like that with Porzingis. He's got a decision to make, obviously, player option or opt out, and he's in control of that. Kuzma, free agent, been over that a million times. The next thing is you got to figure out who you really want to keep, who's a part of your future. You have the number 8 pick in this draft. You have Denny Avdia. You have Johnny Davis. I think you make a move to potentially trade DeLon Wright. That could be a sneaky, really good move for a contender to bring in one of the best defensive point guards in the league. But like you are, if you're Michael Winger and whoever he hires as GM, in my opinion, stripping this thing down for parts. Whatever you can get in return value, you get. And if you have to attach a DeLon Wright to Bradley Beal to make that more appealing to the team that you're trading him for because of Brad's contract, you do those kinds of things. But to me, like those are the kinds of things that you're looking at. And what's really kind of sad is when I go through that exercise myself, there's no one on the roster that's untouchable. They don't have a single guy who I'm like, no, I don't trade him. That's a mistake. But that's the reality of where we are right now with the Washington Wizards. What does David Aldridge think? That is certainly a question I ask myself often when it comes to basketball. What would DA do? Well, I don't have to hypothesize because DA, the Hall of Famer, joins us next here on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.